Welcome to Complete BS, the official podcast of couch coaches everywhere. Not just football. It's every sport that ruins your parlay, wrecks your fantasy week, and still brings you back for more. Buzzer beaters, blown leads, and brackets in flames. Yeah, we're all over it. Unfiltered takes, armchair analysis, and enough bold opinions to fill a playbook. Hosted by Brian Schmuck, sports junkie, the Saban of stats, and your official voice of, I could coach better than that. Let's go.
Couch Coach Nation, week 13, and here we go. This is usually Cupcake Weekend. Not a lot of teams schedule really difficult teams ahead of rivalry weekend next weekend, but the noon window, I can still feel my multi-view. I've got Missouri at Oklahoma, Miami at Virginia Tech, Louisville at SMU, and Kansas, Iowa State. Moved to 3:30, the multi-view looks like USC-Oregon, Arkansas, Texas. Slide in at 4 o'clock, Kansas State, Utah, and bring along TCU Houston. We move to the night. Pitt at Georgia Tech, Nebraska, Penn State, 7:30 Tennessee at Florida, and BYU Cincinnati at 8. Still a lot of good games out there. Got a couple of group of 5 teams that I'm curious how they're going to play against underperforming SEC teams. Coastal Carolina, they're at South Carolina. Western Kentucky, they're at LSU. I'm not saying there's going to be an upset. I'm curious how these smaller schools are going to play against some underperforming SEC teams. If you're an FCS fan, 2 o'clock, you've got the Brawl in the Wild. Number 3, Montana State goes to number 2, Montana in a big showdown rivalry weekend in the FCS. Friday night, we got Florida State at NC State. Florida State hasn't won a road game since 2023, and they're trying to see if maybe they can get bowl eligible. It seems like Florida State's going to keep Mike Norvell. They're at 5-5, get a win either this weekend or next weekend, and they're bowl eligible. NC State, they're also 5-5 with UNC next weekend, so they're kind of in the same boat. They do have a brand new chancellor at NC State, and there's been a lot of talk about maybe next year's not Dave Dornan's 14th season. We'll see what happens if they decide not to stick with Dornan. Here's a little wild name to throw out there. Guy's never been a college coach, never been a pro coach. He's in his 5th year coaching high school football, but last year he was 12-2. This year he's 12-0 in the state playoffs with a highly rated quarterback. His son, Gunnar Rivers, I'm talking about North Carolina State's favorite son, Phillip Rivers, might be somebody that they could look at if they want to move on from Dave Dornan. Even with a slate of games that may not excite everyone, there's still a lot to like, a lot to watch. Make sure you go over to couchcoachnation.com and join the conversation all day Saturday. AV, you ready to go?
Let's go, man. I'm looking forward to it. Always some good games to find. Even some games that aren't marquee tend to be exciting down the end, in the fourth quarter. So I'm looking forward to watching all the games as per usual. You look forward to college football all year. Now there's a couple of games left in the regular season, and you got to enjoy it.
Well, let's start off with one of the big ones of the day. Game day is going to be at USC-Oregon in Eugene. Oregon's a 9.5-point favorite. I've seen it as high as 10.5. Oregon, their 2 best wins of the year came in the last 2 weeks against Iowa and to Minnesota. But those are their only Power 4 wins over teams with winning records. And both of those teams are 6-4. Oregon's the only team in the top 10 to not have a win over a team that's currently ranked. USC and specifically Lincoln Riley, they struggle on the road. USC's 2-2 this year with losses to then number 23 Illinois and then number 13 Notre Dame. At USC, Riley's 4-9 in true road games and 0-6 versus ranked teams. USC, they've used 12 different O-line combinations this season due to various injuries, and Oregon's top 10 in the nation in sacks. Oregon's got the number 1 pass defense in the Big Ten. USC's got the top total offense and top passing attack. This is a true strength versus strength matchup. They're number 2 and number 3 in scoring offenses with less than a point separating them. Hey, how do you see this game?
Hey, man, I'm excited about this one. It's funny because they have a common opponent the last 2 weeks. Oregon went out to Iowa and played up there, and it was a rainy, nasty, close game that Oregon had to come from behind and win, and we talked about how that was a good win for them. And then USC played them at home last week. Not quite the same conditions, but I'll be honest, I was impressed with the win for USC over Iowa. I thought they played tough, physical, and I hadn't seen that in a while from them. But one problem is they gave up 183 yards rushing to Iowa, and Oregon's got running backs that can get it done. They've got a running game, and you mentioned USC struggles on the road. I love Mekhi Lemon, and I think if they can throw the ball and sling it around a little bit, that they'll have a chance. They'll score some points, but I think Oregon's a more complete team than USC. I think you mentioned USC struggle on the road, so I've got Oregon winning this one 27-17.
With all the injuries USC's got, Oregon's defensive strength, their pass rush, with the game being in Autzen Stadium, Lincoln Riley's trouble on the road, it looks like a no-brainer to pick Oregon. However, it's got to end at some point for Lincoln Riley, and since the emergence of King Miller running the ball for USC, they're a little bit more balanced. This is a gut-feeling game for me, and I'm going with USC in an old-fashioned Pac-12 shootout, 41-38. USC gets the upset on the road. Let's move on to Tennessee at Florida, and this rivalry is usually a September clash. It marks only the second time they played in November since 1955. Tennessee hasn't won in Gainesville since 2003, and the Gators are 17-3 in the last 20 matchups. Florida's 0-3 under interim coach Billy Gonzalez, who took over for Billy Napier, who was fired earlier this season. Tennessee, they've got the top offense in the SEC, whereas Florida has the second worst offense. Tennessee's defense is one of the worst in the conference, and Florida's defense statistically doesn't look great. It's what has kept them in games against better teams. Tennessee's pass defense is particularly bad, and Florida could have an opportunity to take some shots down the field, even though they have a depleted wide receiving core. Florida's got players out with injuries on both sides of the ball. It's going to make it hard for them to keep pace with Tennessee's offense. I've got the Vols winning in Gainesville 35-21.
Yeah, Tennessee has given up the most yards through the air this year in the SEC. They're the worst in the SEC defending the pass, but can UF pass? Lagway's had his struggles, but more importantly, all the injuries to the wide receivers. I don't think they're going to be able to exploit that weakness quite as much as they needed to. I've been on the UF defense bandwagon all year, saying how good they were, but the last 5 games, they've given up 30 points per game. I do agree with you that they kind of kept them in games, but with all the injuries they've had, they just wear down. I think Joey Aguilar is good enough. I'm a big fan of Chris Brazell, the wide receiver for Tennessee. If they can't beat Florida and Gainesville this year, it may never happen ever again. I've got a very similar score to you, Tennessee 33-24.
Yeah, I think if Florida was healthy, this game would be a lot closer, and it could go anywhere. It could go either way. The fact that it's only a 3.5-point game really surprised me. Coming up, we've got AV's pick of Pitt and Georgia Tech. I'll give my pick a little bit later with Georgia Tech All-American Joe Hamilton. AV, what do you got?
Well, I think like most of the year, once games started getting played, people thought, including myself, that Georgia Tech was the best team in the ACC. And they might be, but their defense has been suspect recently. They have to outscore people. You look at like when they played NC State and lost, NC State put 48 on them. BC last week hung around and put 36 on them. So I don't trust that defense. They're going to go up against a Pitt offense that can throw the ball around and potentially score some points. Georgia Tech has to outscore people. Pitt, I don't know how to read them either because they had a nice run where they were beating all the teams they were better than, and as soon as they played a good team, they folded. So I don't know really what to expect in this game. I think it's going to be high scoring. I think both defenses will struggle. I don't really trust Georgia Tech, but I do trust Haynes King. He's the best player in the country. Nobody gives credit to, or at least the credit he deserves. I think he should be in the Heisman conversation, and he's not. So I'm going to ride with Georgia Tech and Haynes King 38-34 in Atlanta. I think home field advantage plays a part in this too.
Absolutely. Well, now we got AV's book club. Let's make some money. Tell me some winners.
All right, I got 3 picks this week, and one of them I just talked about, so we'll hit that one first. It's going to be the Georgia Tech-Pittsburgh game. I think both offenses move the ball up and down the field. Both defenses struggle. I'm going to take the over 62.5. I think both teams can get in the 30s pretty easily. So I'm going to take the over in that game. I'm going to go out west and take Cal minus 3.5 at Stanford. I just think they're a more rounded, better prepared team. Stanford, it's on the West Coast, so even though it's a home game, it's not that full travel game like they've been getting in the ACC, and there's really no home field advantage on the farm in Stanford. And then I'm going to take Texas over Arkansas minus 8.5. At some point, Arkansas is going to mail it in. I think Texas is just more talented, so reasonable spread. I'm going to ride with it.
Before I get to my bonus pick, can I say the line that scares me the most, and I don't understand it, is Penn State, who is 4-6 at home, and they're a 9.5-point home favorite to 7-3 Nebraska. Maybe it's a pick 'em at a neutral site. Maybe you give them a field goal because Penn State's at home, but 9.5? I don't get it, so I would say stay away from that game. I get Penn State has played some folks close. Nebraska, you don't really know what to think of them, but 9.5 seemed like a lot, so I didn't really understand that one. My bonus pick is the USC-Oregon game over 59.5. I know I called the upset earlier for USC to win. Maybe that makes you a little bit nervous, but there's going to be a lot of points scored in this game. 2 out of the last 3 times they played, the overs hit. Oregon hits on overs 60% of the time when they're playing home games. USC 50% of the time on the road. Oregon's got the number 7 scoring offense at 39 points a game. USC's got the number 10 scoring offense at 38.2 points a game. Defensively, Oregon's only allowing 13.7 points a game, so maybe that gives you pause, but the only team in the top 50 offenses in the country was Indiana, who put 30 on them, and Oregon lost. Oregon's played bottom tier Big Ten teams against the worst offenses in the Big Ten. USC is going to score on them. Oregon's going to score on USC. You might want to stay away from picking the winner, but this over, it's going to hit. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with Georgia Tech legend and All-American Joe Hamilton. Welcome back, Couch Coach Nation. I'm excited to have Georgia Tech legend and All-American Joe Hamilton join us on Complete BS. Before Joe took the ACC by storm, he was a star quarterback at Macedonia High School in Eldon, South Carolina. He was recruited to Georgia Tech by George O'Leary and took over the following year as a redshirt freshman. Joe was a dual-threat quarterback in the mold of Charlie Ward and Tony Rice. In 1998, he led the Yellow Jackets to a 10-2 record and a top 10 finish in the AP poll. Individually, the 1999 season was Joe's masterpiece. He threw for over 3,000 yards and 29 touchdowns, adding over 700 more yards on the ground and 6 more trips to the end zone. His efforts were recognized with a trip to New York, where he was second in the Heisman Trophy voting, won the Davey O'Brien Quarterback Award, Consensus All-American, and ACC Player of the Year. Since his college days, he was also named to the ACC 50th anniversary team, named an ACC legend, inducted into the South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame, and inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame. He was selected in the 7th round by the Tampa Bay Bucks and was a part of their Super Bowl 37 team that beat the Oakland Raiders. He spent time in NFL Europe and the Arena League. Joe's been active since his playing days in coaching, broadcasting, and serving in his community. Perhaps his best coaching accomplishment can be seen Friday nights, where his son is a standout high school quarterback. Joe, it's an honor to have you on Complete BS.
Thanks a lot, Brian. You tickled my fancy, brother. You give a great introductory speech, and it gave me chills, or it's giving me chills when you say Friday nights, talking about young Skylar Hamilton. Glad to be on, man. Excited about this week for Georgia Tech, coming up Saturday against Pitt, and I'm also excited about Friday night, which my son is going to play the second round of high school football game against GAC, Greater Atlanta Christian, down here in Georgia.
Very good. Well, I always like to start off talking recruiting. It's one of my favorite topics. Tell me a little bit about that process for you, and specifically, like with your size, were schools wanting to change you to a different position, and where were you considering?
Yeah, absolutely, Brian. I dealt with that as far as having that wherewithal to say to everybody that I am a quarterback. Yes, I'm an athlete. Yes, I played basketball. Yes, I probably could go out there and catch a few passes or maybe cover a few receivers out there, but at nature, at heart, ever since I watched Joe Montana and those guys growing up, I wanted to be a quarterback, and that's what I played. And it affected my recruiting, and it affected my recruiting to the tune. That was one of my biggest questions, my family and I, that say, hey, how long in the preseason, how long in fall camp, if I make a few mistakes here and there that quarterbacks normally make, how long are you going to give me? Are you going to allow me to develop and groom as a quarterback and make mistakes? Or are you going to be quickly going to move me to DB or wide receiver? So Clemson, to give an example, they irritated me in my recruiting process. That's a hometown kid. You either want to go to South Carolina or you want to go to the Clemson Tigers. And they would not, Brian, they would not take athlete off the board. I wanted them to take athlete off of my sticker. When you go around and you say, what are you recruiting him as? They would always say athlete. I said, no, coach, come on. I'm a quarterback. Please change that. Clemson refused to change that. And as history goes, I had an axe to grind. I felt some type of way, even in my playing days against Clemson. I wanted to beat them so bad because of that, to the point to where my recruiting got got a little bit sophisticated because Penn State and the late, great Joe Paterno, even them, they removed athlete from my sticker. Knowing that Wiley Richardson, the Kerry Collins, the Todd Blackledge, all those guys, 6'4", 220. I know the history of Penn State quarterbacking. I know the history of what they want behind the center. So my claim to fame, Brien, in my recruiting process is the fact that Joe Paterno and Tom Osborne sat in my living room. I mean, you don't get that. I mean, you know history like I know history of college football and the greats. That's something that I'll always remember. And I also remember that I had committed to Nebraska. I went out there for a visit, and during my visit, my official visit, they were practicing for the Orange Bowl in 1994. So I got a chance to be involved with all that, see their meeting rooms, see how they go about practicing on a day-to-day basis. And when I got home, I had committed to Nebraska. I wanted to go there because that was going to be Tommy Frazier's last year in 1995. And I'm thinking I'd come in, redshirt that year, and then take over after him when he leaves. But when I got home and I told mom and dad, and especially mom, she was so happy for me. But that look on her face when she said, man, that's far away. That's a long ways away. So that was the reason probably that I didn't go to Nebraska, was because of their distance, my style of play and how I like playing football. I think that was a good fit under Coach Tom Osborne, but just the distance. And then Georgia Leary came in. Georgia Tech was 1-10 before I got there in 1994, and I got there in 1995. And Georgia Leary told me specifically, directly, that you are a quarterback and you will be competing as a quarterback. And that's all I needed. And by God, Brien, to this day, Georgia Leary lived up to it. Brandon Shaw and I had a complete quarterback battle when I got to Georgia Tech. So I'm always indebted to Coach Georgia Leary because he was truthful in my living room about the competition and about not moving me from quarterback to any other skill position. And, you know, the rest is history.
You know, it fascinates me that you almost ended up at Nebraska and what Tommy Frazier was able to do there coming out of Florida. I know Peter Warwick, who was a high school quarterback, was also being recruited by Tom Osborne to go to Nebraska and to be a quarterback, an option quarterback there. And what could have been, thinking about you in that system and how you ended up playing in your career, man, that Nebraska lineage dynasty could have just continued rolling on after Tommy Frazier. It leads me into my next question. And I mentioned Charlie Ward and Tony Rice earlier, Tony being from the late 80s and Charlie in the early 90s. Charlie was a little bit more of a passer, Tony a bit more of a runner. Was there a quarterback that you modeled your game after? I know you mentioned Joe Montana and loving him.
My dad told me at a very early age playing quarterback, it doesn't matter who gets in the end zone or how you get in the end zone, that quarterback led that drive. So whether you handed it off 3 or 4 times, handed it off 10 times, or threw it 10 times, or whether somebody else ran it in the end zone or you ran it or threw it in the end zone, it's a touchdown led by the quarterback. So I've always admired the leadership of a quarterback and being able to go out there and lead their team. But as far as skill set, it was Charlie Ward. It was Charlie Ward because I remember my sophomore, junior, and senior season. Whatever side he had his towel on, I had my towel on. How he carried out his fake, which was like a magician, I carried out my fake the exact same way. I wanted my release to look just like Charlie Ward. If he had on 2 wristbands on his elbow, I would have on 2 wristbands on my elbow. Whatever brand of mouthpiece he had, I wanted that brand. I just idolized him, the way he went about leading. The guys rallied around him and just the will to win. And I also was a 2-sport athlete as far as playing basketball as well. So that gravitated me to him as well, as far as just being able to, you know, be a point guard leadership, be a quarterback leadership, and being an athlete that way. And I sprinkle in Tony Rice because Tony Rice is from South Carolina and I grew up watching him as well. And just that combination, what you want to be able to be known as, from my perspective, is a quarterback that can have an offensive coordinator not be handicapped. If you want to throw it 20 yards down the field, I can do that. If you want to throw it across the middle, I can do that. If you want to run the option, coach, I can do that. And whatever I can't do, let me know my weaknesses and I'll go home or I go that offseason and work on it, work very hard on it. And when we come back in fall or the next season, that wouldn't be a problem for you anymore. So I wanted to be an overall, dual threat type of quarterback.
George O'Leary ran the triple option, which often means the quarterback takes a beating. You stayed really healthy in your career. What was the key for you in staying healthy? And did you ever say, Coach, can't we add a few more dropbacks in here? How about a couple shotgun snaps?
Actually, we didn't run the option that much like that. But shout out to Coach Frazier. Coach Frazier saw a skill set in me and the skilled players around me, and he utilized those. We would be in a formation and then a spread formation, and all of a sudden we would end up in the wishbone. We would sprinkle in the 32 dive, 33 dive, speed option, sprint out option, but we would also have pure dropbacks. And what I've always said, and when I look at quarterbacks now that's considered dual threat, how can you take a hit off of you? I don't need you running into guys intentionally. Yeah, but it's the fourth quarter and you need 1 yard for a first down or 1 yard for a touchdown. Yes, you sell your body out. Yes, you go for the extra yardage. But in the first quarter, if somebody's 2 or 3 guys there, go down. If you're not a fan of sliding, dive forward. But just give your body up to where you're not taking those hits, because totality of hits matter. It doesn't matter if you're in the pocket and somebody tackles you or hits you or you get sacked, or you're running quarterback and you're getting tackled downfield. It all adds up to, in the fourth quarter, you feel those hits, and maybe it's a shoulder or the elbow, that some of those hits you could have eased off of yourself and not taking as much hits as you did during the game or during the season.
You mentioned Coach Friedgen, and that led me right into my next question to ask you a little bit about the tandem of George O'Leary and Ralph Friedgen and their style of offense and how they were able to bring you along and develop you into that junior and senior year where you were able to just dominate the ACC.
That's a great question, Brian, because that is exactly how it would happen. Developing, bringing along, having my feedback, testing me. What do you like? What don't you like? What do you feel comfortable doing? And that in spring ball, the entire playbook was open. You had to learn it. You had to run a lot of different plays to see what sticks, what don't stick. How can we utilize you? But it was a good mix of those guys being father figures. Coach George O'Leary and Coach Ralph Friedgen was just like my dad, real tough love. They would give you credit, yes, on doing things well, but they honed in on how could you get better? How could you improve on trying to be the very best you can be? And for my sophomore year, I got a little bit more of the offense, and Coach Friedgen would ask me a little bit, 1 or 2 questions about how I feel and what I wanted to run. My junior year went up to maybe 10 to 12 questions he would allow me to ask and allow me to have the input in the offense. By my senior year, he would ask me, hey, what do you feel like running here? Do you feel comfortable with this? And the minute I hesitated, or the minute I did not have a direct answer or a quick answer for him about a play or the comfortability of a play, he would quickly throw it out. We don't need you being confused. We don't need you being hesitant. We need you calling out that play to those 10 men in that huddle with enthusiasm, passion, and belief. And that's what they instilled. And just the fact that they let us as players, as a team, communicate, talk back to them, not in a negative way, but just let them know what's open, how they feel. Do you feel comfortable? And they were hard-nosed, if I can say, hard-nosed players, coaches.
Well, as I mentioned to you when we were talking before we got on the show, I did go to Florida State, so I want to go back to September of 1999. Number 10, Georgia Tech at number 1, Florida State. I was in the stadium this game, a quarterback battle between now Georgia Tech's quarterback coach Chris Winkie and yourself. FSU escaped 41-35. You were 22 of 25 that day for 387 yards, 4 passing touchdowns, 1 touchdown on the ground. What do you remember about that day in that game?
I take you back to that week. Coach Ralph Friedgen, in his great sense of humor, he gave George Garcia a lot of reps. He gave George Garcia more reps than he'd ever given him during a week of preparation as far as first-team reps. Not just reps, first-team reps. And why he did that, Brian, is because 3 previous games that I started against Florida State, I did not finish. I got hit. I got knocked out. I was one of those quarterbacks that continued to streak. I think Florida State was knocking out or had knocked out 7 straight quarterbacks that didn't finish the game. I think I was number 8, or they were 6, or the streak was at 6 and I was number 7. But I had to finish the game. So I remember on the back of the bus talking to Kelly Campbell that I'm going to finish this game and I'm going to be the best player on the football field. I'm going to finish it. I'm going to, make sure they know that I am a gamer, that I'm a big-time player that can play with big-time guys, number 1 team in the nation, an all-world quarterback, all-world athlete, and Peter Warwick, a very skilled team. And I just remember that it was a back-and-forth game. It was a back-and-forth game that I knew that we opened up the play. Our first play of the game was an 80-yard strike to Des White. It was back and forth, and you kind of felt in the rhythm. Those are the type of games that, hey, man, I can play out in this playground all night long. Does mom have to call me in? Let us stay out here overnight. And I just felt that let's keep on playing. And it came down to 1 stop. We're just needing 1 stop, and we did not get that stop. And for me, I love the fact that Florida State went on to win the national championship that year. So you got beat by a better team, but you competed. You competed, and they just didn't beat you because you didn't prepare or you were scared or intimidated. They just beat you. You had nothing left in the tank. I remember Bobby Bowden saying in the paper the next day that, man, I was tough to handle. That was a very good feeling. And on a sour, tight note, it's one of my best games I've ever played. One of my best games, the rhythm, the competition, everything was at stake. But I don't like to talk about it much because it's hard to talk about one of your best games and you don't come out victorious. But it was an outstanding atmosphere and one of my biggest and proudest moments to be able to go down to Tallahassee and compete against the number one team in the nation.
Well, I don't know if Kelly Campbell often sat next to you on the bus, but after that game, I'm sure he did because you found him a lot in that game. Something like 7 or 8 catches, about 140 yards. Peter Warrick was doing the same thing on the other side. And that particular year in 1999, I personally believe that you and Peter Warrick were the two best college football players in the 1999 season. I know Ron Dayne won the Heisman. Personally, I felt like it was a Lifetime Achievement Award for what he had done over a great 4-year career. But what was that week like for you, that Heisman week in New York?
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And like I said a little bit earlier, I am a historian of college football, and especially the Heisman Trophy winners. When you go down downtown the athletic club, and remember, for me, that was the last year that it would be at the original downtown athletic club before they moved it, when the elevators were very small and it only could fit 3 or 4 in them at a time. And just shaking the hands of the greats, Archie Griffin, everybody was in attendance. And to have Doug Flutie there, have a little bit of a dialogue that he said while I was up there, that he said that he loves watching me, that he enjoyed watching me, was a big moment in my life. And I've always said, and I'll say it again, yeah, Ron Dayne won the Heisman Trophy. And if you was to tell me that Ron Dayne would win that Heisman Trophy 10 out of 10 times, and you still invite me to the Heisman Trophy ceremony 10 times, I am going. I mean, the trip on the bus with all the Heisman Trophy winners down to Rockefeller, down to downtown New York, just the fellowship, going to the ESPN zone back then and shooting hoops and playing, throwing the football with Chad Pennington, Drew Brees, and Michael Vick. It's just outstanding. I'll tell you a funny story. You know the little game that in the arcades where you the little Nerf ball and you throw it through the hole as a quarterback? Drew Brees, Joe Hamilton, Mike Vick, and Chad Pennington at the ESPN zone must have spent 2.5 hours right there. And that's when I knew that Drew Brees, he was not human when it comes to accuracy. He sat there, I think he made like 51 straight balls through that hoop or through that hole. And we were like, wow, how do we catch Drew Brees? So we stood up there, we competed, we talked football, we respected each other, and it was just such a great feeling that you would be recognized as one of the top 5, top 3, top 2 athletes or position players in the nation.
Moving on, we've got a big game this weekend, but next week, if we just kind of look ahead a little bit, we've got some clean, old-fashioned hate coming up. Your 4 years, Georgia Tech was 2-2 against Georgia, but wins your junior and senior year against the Bulldogs. 99, you won 51-48 in an overtime game. What's that rivalry like for you and your memories of playing Georgia and then specifically that overtime game?
Clean, old-fashioned hate. That's what it's all about. I'm getting chill bumps now, Brien, for the simple fact that it means a lot. It means a whole lot. I mean, I consider it as the best rivalry in sports, the best rivalry definitely in college football, in my opinion, because of what it entails as far as the bragging rights for the entire year. Only an hour and probably 15 minutes apart. You know those guys because of the offseason and because of the newspaper and the hype. You know most of those players on the opposite team. Just my senior year, Bobby Dodd Stadium. My last year playing, or my last game playing in Bobby Dodd Stadium was against the Georgia Bulldogs in a barn burner. As players, you always want a game to be down to the wire when it's a big nationally televised game and a lot of chips are on the table. You don't want a blowout. You don't want the guys to, not play or somebody to be injured where they're not full strength. You want it to be a great game for the fans and for you to be very competitive in that game. And I just remember that, I told my mom and dad because I was the last one to be introduced because it was my last game. It was also senior day. And I said, hey, watch this, Mom. Watch this, Dad. I have something for you guys that I've been working all practice long. And it wasn't a new wrinkle that I was working on. It's just the intensity and the focus that this is going to be my last game. When you check my tank, there's going to be nothing in it. My tank is going to be completely empty. I'm going to have nothing left. And that is exactly what happened. Just to win your last 2 games against the Bulldogs means a lot. And to own the Governor's Cup. I tell you briefly about the Governor's Cup. Every year, who wins that game gets to take the Governor's Cup. It's a trophy that says you won that particular year. But the senior class that wins, they get a little replica of that cup. Not the juniors, not the sophomores. Everybody don't get it. Just those seniors get it. So my junior year, I didn't get a cup because I was not a senior when we won up in Athens. And I'm like, oh man, we must win this game at home my senior year because I want that cup to be able to put in my mom's trophy case or our trophy case at home to be able to say, hey, my last game against those Georgia Bulldogs, I have that cup that we won that game. It's a massive deal. And I can't wait for one day after Thanksgiving this year to face those Georgia Bulldogs.
You mentioned as you progressed in your development in the offense and the coaches giving you a little bit more opportunity to have impact and say on the plays. Did you ever call an audible that you got to the sidelines and the coaches looked at you and said, where in the world did that come from, whether it was good or bad?
Well, yes. And it was a good deal. It was nothing that I drew up in the dirt. It wasn't anything that was outside of the game plan. But this particular audible wasn't needed. It was, I think, 2nd and short, 2nd and 6, I think. And it was a run play. But we had talked all week and we had talked pregame that if we see this look as far as the coverage, you could always max protect, set the protection where you want to set the protection, and then you can run a hitch and go on the outside. And the down and distance didn't call for it. I knew that if you ran it again, you maybe could pick up the first down or you can get it in 3rd and short. But I said, I'm going to take advantage of this. I'm going to go out on the limb. And it is great you asked that question, Brian, because as a junior, I would not have made that audible. It is the correct audible I can, but I would not have enough confidence to go out on the limb or go out on my own without being told to make sure you heads up. You can call an audible here or you can call an audible when you see that look. I just took it upon myself and said, this is the look we talked about and this is the look I want. Let's go for it. So I called the audible and I got to the side and find Coach Friedrich just pat me on my shoulder. He said, you took me at my word, huh, didn't you? I said, yeah, you said when I saw it, go ahead and call it. And it ended up being a touchdown. So that was a great feeling. And that just builds trust. More trust in your team, your teammates, more trust in the coaching staff that you can handle some things on your own and that if anything goes haywire, you can be able to put that train back on the track.
Just before we get to this week's game, I want to talk a little bit about Haynes King. I don't think he gets enough respect nationally. I don't think he gets enough respect in the Heisman Trophy conversation. He's the do-everything guy for Georgia Tech. As he goes, they go. His passing, his ability to pick up first downs in the running game. Talk to me a little bit about King and what you see from him.
Well, what I love about Haynes King is that he's the yellow jacket. And the reason why I love that he's a yellow jacket because he embodies what we are all about. Tech tough. When I got to Tech in 1995, that was the mantra. And toughness is not, you big and bad and you can lift a lot of weights. Are you mentally tough? Are you going to do the little things? Are you unselfish? Are you going to be in the foxhole with everybody as a quarterback and lead the right way and not cut corners? That's who Haynes King is. He always want to bring in his teammates. He's always going to fight for that extra yard. He's always going to be where he needs to be and where he's supposed to be at all times. And the encouragement and the attitude of never giving up is what Haynes King is all about. Coach Key was my left guard at Georgia Tech. He won 3 straight against Georgia. So Brent Key started a lot of games protecting me as a left guard. And he knows about Tech tough. He knows about how we want Tech to go out and play as far as on the games on Saturday. If you beat Georgia Tech, we'll shake your hand, but you're going to have to go out there and beat us. We're not going to give up. And the way Haynes King is accurate with his legs on the move, the way he's running in between the tackles, this is not outside zone. This is not running out of bounds. He's running and facing linebackers time and time again, carrying the ball 18 to 20 times a game. So the durability, the toughness, the leadership, the attitude is all. I love it all about Haynes King. And he'll go down as one of the greatest quarterbacks in Georgia Tech history. He's already there. And I can't wait to see what the rest of the season entails because he's on his way to being a legend in a yellow jacket uniform.
Absolutely. And they've got a lot to play for, still in the mix for the ACC championship game, still in the mix for the college football playoffs. But before that, they've got to get past Pittsburgh. Saturday, Georgia Tech's a 2.5-point favorite. Both teams have one loss in the conference. This is Tech's last conference game. If they win, they're in the ACC championship game. Pitt, they still got Miami, and then a couple other teams still got to sort things out. But Georgia Tech, they just have to win, and they're in. Last week, they barely got past a really bad Boston College team. If they bring that same sort of effort again, it's going to be a long day on Saturday. Pitt, they lost last Saturday to Notre Dame, and Notre Dame dominated them throughout this game. Pitt had a 5-game winning streak with Mason Heichel at quarterback, and that gave everybody a lot of optimism about what Pitt was, but those 5 wins were against the 5 worst ACC teams in Boston College, Florida State, Syracuse, NC State, and Stanford. Tech leads the ACC in total offense, about 90 yards ahead of where Pitt sits at. Georgia Tech, they've been really balanced all year, both on the ground and the air. Pitt has really struggled to find any sort of consistency on the ground. Desmond Reed has been hurt a lot this season, in and out of games, missed some games completely. What his status is for Saturday remains to be seen. The rushing defense might be the key to this game. Well, Tech wants to run, and they do so for about 225 yards a game. Pitt's rushing defense is second in the ACC, giving up only 90 yards a game. But Tech has the second worst rushing defense, giving up 166 yards a game. And while Pitt doesn't do that well, that might be an opportunity against the Tech defense to get a little something going and be able to let Mason Heichel relax into the game and get his feet wet in this big game. Pitt only has one game where they've had someone go over 68 yards rushing. They're going to need to be able to run the ball against Georgia Tech if they want to stay in it. Joe, how do you see this game going?
Well, unfortunately for Pitt, the Achilles heel for Georgia Tech has been the running game, especially as of late, and Pitt does not run the ball well at all. Now, the game plan for Coach Narduzzi is going to be to try to establish the run and keep the ball out of Haynes King's hand. No doubt about it. That's the recipe for a win for Pitt. But I just don't see it happening. I just don't see it happening for Pitt because I don't see Pitt getting to 30 points. Georgia Tech is going to score 27 to 30 points with being able to run Haynes King with his legs, being able to take advantage of the wide receivers on the edge, the formations, the shifts, Haynes in the backfield, Hosley in the backfield. All those guys are going to be coming at you in a different way. And the OC for the Yellow Jackets, Buster Faulkner, does an excellent job of showing you eye candy, giving you something and coming back the other way. A lot of misdirection. So that is what I will say is that it's going to be a battle of wills, Brian. It's going to be a battle of wills. This is the type of game that you're going to have to pack your lunch because of the physicality. It's going to be physical. Every team that Pitt's had in the last decade under Coach Narduzzi has been very physical. Now, maybe they don't have the skill position guys outside or maybe the explosive running backs and things of that nature, but when you're talking about in the trenches, offensively and defensive line, they want to maul you. They want to get their hands on you. They want to make it a muddy game. Pitt is going to try to muddy the ball game up, and if Haynes King and the Yellow Jackets offense can protect the ball like they've done all season, I think they only have 7 turnovers the entire season. If they can continue to protect the football, high percentage of third down, which they lead the ACC in the third down percentage, can you do that? Can you protect your home field? The Yellow Jackets in 2 years have not lost a home game, so I think that's an advantage. And so when the crowd is going to be packed up with Bobby Dodd, it's going to be a 7 o'clock night game, which is going to infuse a lot of energy as well. I have Georgia Tech just really seizing the moment. I have Britt Key, and even when you talk about last week, a lot of people will say you should have blown BC out and you had a lackluster performance. And that's right. But those are human. Those are young adults. Those are college kids. Yeah, maybe they're looking ahead. Maybe they did look at a Boston College team with only one win in the ACC and saying that we should roll over those guys and we don't have to play our very best. Well, what I will give them credit for is they came out with a win. It's sad if you play your worst game or you don't get up for an opponent or you take an opponent lightly and then you end up losing. But in this case, you found a way to win and you escaped, so to speak, and now you moved on. So I would say that the Yellow Jackets probably looked ahead, probably overlooked BC a little bit, and BC got a little bit momentum. And anytime you get a team having momentum, it's hard to stop that momentum. But I assure you this, the Yellow Jackets will be ready to play Saturday night, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited to see them play.
And I believe I heard you say you think they're going to win the game Saturday?
Oh, absolutely. I think the Yellow Jackets are going to win the game. And even if I was to take my homer hat off, Brian, I would still say the Yellow Jackets because I just don't see Pitt's offense manufacturing enough points to keep up with the Yellow Jackets. While I do respect Pitt's defense, that's number one in rushing in the ACC and a very stout defense, will they be able to hold up? Will they be able to hold up with all the different weapons and all the different skill guys that's going to touch the ball for the Yellow Jackets? Because when your offense is constantly 3 and out, short drives, and giving the ball back to your opponent's offense, I think Pitt's defense is going to wear down a little bit, and I don't think they will be able to score enough. I call that score, Brian, 27-20. 27-20, Georgia Tech.
All right. Well, I do think this is going to be a really close and entertaining game. It's at Bobby Dodd. This is the first time in about a month that Georgia Tech's been at home. Mason Heichel for Pitt. He came back to reality a little bit last week. The Georgia Tech defense is not on par with the Notre Dame defense, so I do think he'll have some opportunities to take shots down the field in a close game with an ACC championship game appearance on the line. I trust the senior quarterback playing at home over a freshman quarterback on the road. I've got Haynes King and the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets getting it done 31-27, punching their ticket to Charlotte for the ACC championship game. I want to thank Joe Hamilton for joining us today. Really appreciate it. He had so much great insight in his background in Georgia Tech. Remember, Couch Coach Nation, head over to www.couchcoachnation.com. Join the nation. You can follow the Complete BS Pod on X and Instagram, wherever you get your podcasts.
Thanks for listening to Complete BS. Be sure to subscribe, share, and follow us online. And tell us what you think of this episode. Use hashtag CouchCoachNation, and let's keep the conversation going.